Well, this week, The Acolyte is back on Disney Plus with episode 3 dropping yesterday. We are going to dig into that as well as hearing Bobby's thoughts about The Acolyte in general so far, since we haven't heard from him about it yet. Let's do it right now. Welcome to Flicker Effect, everybody. I'm Dave Lott. Joining me this week is Bobby Jackson. How's it going, Bobby?
It's going good. It feels like it's been quite a while since I've been on. Actually, it's been a while since we've done a live show and a video on cam show. So it feels kind of weird to be back in the driver's seat again, going into this wild, wild road of the Acolyte. So I'm ready to talk about it, though.
Yeah, speaking of jumping back into streaming, so yeah, it's a good thing to bring up in case things are a little not as smooth as
Oh yeah.
normally would be for us on a live stream or on a previous YouTube video. Um, yeah, bear with us as we jump back into the streaming thing, but hopefully it works out, and if it does, uh, we look forward to doing more of these.
Yeah, man. So Acolyte.
The Acolyte.
So I got a chance to listen to last week's episode that
Okay.
you and Michelle did and talked about it, and I felt like I came in a little bit underneath you and above Michelle in terms of how she feels about the show. For me, it was one of those things where after the first two episodes, I was most definitely intrigued by the show. I felt like there was some elements of it that were new and fresh that they were doing, just even in general, in being 100 years prior to the Phantom Menace and any of the stories that we're used to and characters we're used to. So for me, already just that freshness was a positive. And the story element of it, where we have these, well, at this point, it's, a week past, so I can talk about the first two episodes, okay. But where we have these two twins, or these twins, where they are essentially opposites of each other, and there is this mystery that within the first episode of trying to see what was going on with the character of Osha, or who she was in terms of how that related to May, and this the Jedi that gets killed, played by Carrie Ann Moss in the first episode. So for me, it was like, okay, this is interesting. I want to see where it's going, and get some more elements of some of the things. So I just felt like the first two episodes really presented a nice package of being able to establish this place where we're at within the Star Wars universe, give us some new characters, and tell a different kind of story. So for me, that, along with the visuals of it, I think at this point I feel like I'm just kind of more or less resigned to the fact that not every Star Wars show is going to look as good as Andor. And so I've just sort of been able to kind of get into the mode of, for the for general purposes, it seems like there's levels in which Star Wars looks so far on streaming, and I would say this one is more on the higher end as compared to some of the other ones that seem very lower end. And some of that has to do with the fact that they shot on location for a lot of the stuff, so there's that element to it as well. In a weird sort of way, when I think about the look of this show, it kind of reminds me of, let's say Andor is Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon in terms of the way it looks visually. I would say the Star Wars shows, and maybe even this one specifically, seems to more be it seems to more remind me of the Lord of the Rings show on Amazon in terms of how it looks, more so than um, how it looks towards like a Andor series. So, which I'm okay with at this point. I know that maybe there'll be some more series coming on down the line that maybe will have a different cinematic sort of look to it, but for all intents and purposes, I'm okay with this as it stands. And it's not like there's anything that I can point out that says, "Oh, that looks real CGI ish." It's just more or less the overall look of the show in terms of the aesthetic of it. But yeah, other than that, I was on board after the first two episodes, and I remember seeing after the second episode ended, I was like, yeah, I can't wait to see what happens next week. I was hooked and felt like I was right in line with being able to go on board with the series. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
I was gonna say I know what you mean. I think in terms of the look, like I don't have a problem with the look, and I'm overall actually pretty fine with it. Of course, I guess I kind of wished it had the quality of look as say an Andor, but
Hmm.
it doesn't. Um, and you started saying that, and I was trying to think. I'm like, yeah, what would this be in comparison to like a Game of Thrones on HBO, I guess. And yeah, no, Rings of Power is, I think, pretty spot on, actually. uh so yeah, no, I'd say that's a pretty good comparison. Yeah, and it's not bad, but yeah, it's definitely not the worst thing I've seen
No,
from Disney Star Wars on Disney Plus, like by any stretch of the imagination.
no, definitely not.
Yeah,
So
so that's your, in general, it sounds like you're basically on the same, in the same boat with me. Like you
yeah,
were enjoying it so far to the first two episodes.
yeah.
So with that said, um, episode 3 aired last night, and I mean, I said this last week. I was super curious to know what you thought of the show. And to be clear, we did end up talking about it a little off air,
Right.
because I had to know. You just gave me your kind of very brief thought, like general feeling about the first two episodes. You didn't tell me much, but I had to know. Last night's episode airs, and then today I, go on the internet and as someone who is, just interested in what other people think and going to talk about it tonight on the show. I'm curious, okay, what's the vibe? What's everyone thinking? Um, and it's been interesting. I've had an interesting day. I think I've had an interesting day of reflection actually as a Star Wars fan today. Um, just regarding the fandom, and the Star Wars fandom is definitely something that gets talked about a lot, and
Hmm.
we've talked about it before. And today was the day where I questioned a lot of things, and it was weird. But anyway, I was super curious to see where you fell on episode 3. What was it called? Destiny, I think.
Oh, you know what? I don't even know
I
the
think
title of
I
it. I
think that
didn't
is
even
the
catch it.
title. Um,
Well,
Go ahead. Your spoiler-free thoughts on episode 3.
spoiler free thoughts. Okay, so I think I was kind of in the same boat as you, where I was curious as to what the word was based on this episode, because I don't know in terms of how you went into it, but I had already knew this episode was going to be controversial, to say the least, because when people had got the first four episodes to screen, a lot of them pointed to episode three as one that's going to be more the standout of the first four. And some people I saw, no one ever said why, but from what I gathered, it was like some people really liked episode three and some people really hated episode three. And some people said that episode three is going to ruin Star Wars, and like very big words in terms of how they felt like episode three would be. So I had some sort of preconceived notion that this episode was going to be interesting, to say the least. And I felt like I watched the episode, and while I think I see where it's coming into play, why it's being so controversial, and I would grant you that maybe I could see that it is. I don't think that it's in the larger scheme of thing a big deal. And I also it amazed me at how much when I looked online, um, people acting as if this was like the end of the world for Star Wars, based on the things that happened within this episode. And it was just sort of weird. It was like, okay, maybe this is a sect of people that grew up with a certain era of Star Wars compared to the era I grew up of Star Wars, because when stuff happens in this episode, I was like, okay, that's interesting. That's a different take. And so I felt like I was invested in the episode. I was invested in the story of, and just to not spoil anything, but to just give a little context. This episode is a flashback episode. It takes place in the past, 16 years in the past. So you get to see May's kind of origin story, so to speak, May and Osha's origin story. So for me, I thought like, okay, this is good. You're giving us some background and some more investment into these characters, and to also get into some of what becomes the conflict within the present day of the story. So I thought like, for me, all that stuff worked really well. And my one complaint about the episode, honestly, um, was that I really, more so than any other time I think I've watched anything in Disney Plus streaming for Star Wars, I really felt like this could have used another 10 minutes, 12 minutes. It could have used, maybe, if they didn't do that, then just show us episode 3 and 4 together. Or they, there was something about it that I was like, even that it just felt like it needed some more, with the present. I think even if they had, like, within the episode structure, if it was just, it was in the present, but then it's flashing back to the past, and still continuing to move the present day story forward in some way, as opposed to now having to have to wait another whole week to get more of the present day story. I felt like that was sort of a failing of the structure of the show, of the pacing of the show. But the story itself, I had no issues with, and I was very interested by the end of it in terms of what we got, and wanted to see more, which is why I was a little bit frustrated in the sense of like not getting to see another episode, or not getting a little bit more towards the tail end of what's happening in the present. But overall, I did still like the episode. So I can't say that I'm on the side of the people who feel like it ruined Star Wars for me. So, with that said, I'm curious to hear where you land on it.
So I should say that I went into the episode not really knowing kind of the rumored drama about, I guess, how fans would be affected by episode 3. I think I came across other YouTube video last week that started to kind of touch on it, and then I felt like it said something spoilery, and I turned it off. I think you know what I'm talking about. But that was really it. I quickly, by the way, as I started reading reactions today, especially like on Twitter, I quickly realized that a lot of people went into this episode like expecting like, hey, what's the big deal about episode 3, and why is it going to be
Mm-hmm.
so controversial? It became very clear to me today that basically everyone else knew, and I just didn't, I guess. So I went into the episode. Based again on the spoiler kind of I heard, I had a feeling this was going to be a flashback episode. So that's really all I knew going in. And I also kind of wondered like, oh, maybe it'll be a partial flashback thing, not the whole episode. So I guess that kind of surprised me. But basically, this is my long way of saying I didn't really have expectations about how this episode was going to affect me. And I mean, for those who didn't hear last week, I enjoyed the first 2 episodes overall. I don't think it's as good as Andor, but I also think it's different than Andor, and I enjoyed that it's something new in terms of like the Star Wars timeline. And we have no characters here that we're familiar with, and I'm interested in the story. I enjoyed the first 2 episodes quite a bit, actually. With that said, episode 3, I finished the episode, and my immediate reaction was I thought that was pretty good. I didn't think it was amazing. I I didn't think it was terrible, and it definitely didn't ruin Star Wars for me by any stretch of the imagination. I honestly never, as I was watching the episode, I never came across a moment where it even crossed my mind that there was anything going on that would, ruin Star Wars or change Star Wars drastically. I just really didn't think that whatsoever. I should also point out, like, Bobby, I have kind of consumed some stuff outside of, the movies and TV. And I should say, even I'm talking about live action TV. There's a lot of the animated stuff
Mhm.
I still haven't watched. A lot of books I still haven't read in terms of canon books. When it goes back to, Legends, what's called Legends now, expanded universe stuff,
Yeah.
I never read any of that. But I know enough, as a Star Wars fan, I know enough about some of the stuff that's in some of this other material that I don't know. There was nothing about how like the Force is used in this episode or anything that kind of caught me off guard or seemed weird. Uh, and I've seen reactions today that really like like for instance where I can see video reactions on like TikTok of like people reacting to a certain way the force is used in this episode, like it's just like mind-blowingly like different and just destroys Star Wars, and I'm just like I really don't understand this reaction. Like
Yeah.
it just blows my mind. So yeah, I enjoyed the episode overall and really didn't think it was controversial in any way at all, and was very surprised as I started to see reaction throughout the day.
Mm.
And it was, again, as I said, an interesting day. I don't have much to say right now without talking spoilers, so that's kind
Yeah.
of, I guess, why I'm just kind of ending my thought here. I enjoyed it. I didn't think. I mean, if I had to rank the 3 episodes so far, um, I don't know. I don't think it's my favorite of the three, but uh, there was one or two moments in this episode
Mm.
that I definitely bumped on and was like, ooh, not a fan of that. But that's like kind of nitpicky stuff for me. Like,
Right.
yeah, I don't know. Hopefully, I'm not
Yeah.
babbling too much. Yeah, that was my
Yeah. I guess
thoughts
we
on
gotta get
episode
into.
three. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I think in order for us to really get into it, we definitely have to talk about spoilers.
I think so.
But before we do that, there was one thing that you had mentioned on the podcast that I wanted to respond back to when you said that you wanted to know my thoughts on this series, and this was only when there was episodes 1 and 2,
Right.
and your thoughts were one thing you figured I would like about it. You were actually really right about in terms of like the one thing that Andor lacked for me was the aliens
Yeah.
in terms of being not enough of them around in a Star Wars series,
Hmm.
and this absolutely has a lot of aliens that you would see in a Star Wars universe. So yeah, I wanted to. I remember hearing you say that. I was like, yes, this is actually something that I really have been wanting to see from Star Wars because you don't get to see enough of it. So
You don't.
yeah,
Yeah,
no, and
there's certain things about like the original trilogy that define Star Wars, and yeah, like you've said in the past, there's especially Disney TV Star Wars stuff that misses that like alien presence, these aliens that don't speak English, but yet everyone still kind of understands them, and
mhm.
like you get a lot of these aliens now that just speak perfect English, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that in general, except when you don't have any of the other. It seems like that stuff is missing, and that is
Yeah.
something that does just feel so Star Wars. That was nice to see in these so far.
Yeah. And that in the fact that even sometimes when you do see aliens, they're just humanoid looking. They're just
Right.
very much in makeup or something there. And
Yeah.
there's not much to make them look alien per se. So
Right.
yeah, I definitely appreciated that there was actual weird creatures in this that are alien. So yeah. But I guess to get into the meat of what this episode was, is that we find out that May and Osha are really from a coven of witches. And Witches are nothing new to Star Wars that we know of. If you've watched any of the animated series, you know that the
Right.
witches of Dathomir are around. And you've even seen them a little bit if you've watched Ahsoka. So we
Hmm.
know that there's witches that have practice in this sort of using the force in a different way. And I remember one of the things that I had saw people were bumping up against was the idea that these witches had been using the force but not calling it the force and calling it a thread and saying that this changes what Star Wars is. And it's like, well, I don't know if we watched the same thing, because to me that's no different than someone's interpretation. It could be literally a stand-in for religion and God. Like, if you're if you're
Right.
Christian, you practice one way. If you're Baptist, you practice a different way. If you're
Right.
Muslim, you practice a different. So it's no different than that, in that they have a different perception of how the Force works. So from their perspective, that's their explanation for it. And of course, we've only ever really followed the Jedi, and Sith, so we know of it from that perspective. And so to me, I thought it was a cool and interesting thing to see it from a different perspective and get a different understanding of how other people who wield the Force view it and use it in a different way than the Jedi and what we're familiar with.
Yeah. Uh, like I said, I was familiar with the presence of witches, especially because I have seen Ahsoka, and I've just kind of known that they've been around, and it wasn't like some big surprising thing for me. And the way that they described the Force, I'm like, well, it's still the Force. They're just calling it something else. I basically everything you said, I completely agree with you.
Yeah, so it was weird to see the amount of people just absolutely
Right.
losing their crap about it. It was just, I don't understand it. And then
Nope.
to dovetail it from that into the I think the bigger issue in terms of what I saw that people were having a problem with was the fact that these two women created a life form for one to carry, uh, that was by use of this force or the thread or magic or whatever you want to call it. And oh my goodness, the amount of people
Yeah.
who you would think. I remember during the time the Super Bowl happened, and most of my friends are 49ers fans. And so if you watched the last Super Bowl, you know that they lost. And I remember going on social media and seeing so many videos of people who were at a live event watching the game, and when the 49ers lost in overtime, I saw people get up and throw chairs at their TV set. I saw people kick their TV set over. I saw people get in fights with the people that were at their party. You would think that something so serious as to incite a riot happened, because apparently some other people have done something that was done in purposes for creating Anakin, that it was like it ripped their soul out of their body, and they became. I saw so many nasty comments towards the people who are behind the series, the people who are on the series. It was like, are you kidding me right now? This is what we're doing over a TV show. Like, is Star Wars that important to you and so intertwined into your life that you're getting this upset about it? It's a story. And for me, it was not even like, to me, when I looked at that and I saw it in real time, my thought was like, okay, that's interesting, because while we do know that Anakin has no father and he was born to Shmi, like sort of like through the Force,
Hmm.
there's nothing in recorded history or unrecorded history that says that that couldn't have happened before. Like,
Right.
or that in there in Legends there was a story with Darth Plagueis that happened when it shows the rise of Palpatine to a certain degree, but it's mostly about Plagueis and stuff. And in that story, there's sort of a an idea that Plagueis and with Palpatine, that he had used the Force to kind of create Anakin with Shmi, and they even kind of go back to that storyline in one of the Darth Vader comic books, which is canon. So the idea that the Force could be manipulated to create life is not something that I feel like maybe was an isolated incident just because Palpatine did it. And that doesn't change the fact that, for all intents and purposes of the storyline that we got through the Skywalker saga, that Anakin is still the chosen one. It's just that, to me, like, if any stories ever get told in the old Republic, which is thousands of years before any of the stuff that we're currently aware of, to me it would be like, yeah, certain things probably could have happened before, but in thousands of years, a lot of that stuff could have got lost or changed in translation or whatever. So to me, it doesn't mean anything that someone else might have done this before and it never was found out by anyone else, or someone else has recreated the same thing, or other people have tried to do the same thing and failed. But maybe one other time it worked, and this could be that other time that it worked, but no one knew about it because who knows what the rest of this story is. We don't know what happens to any of these people, so
Right.
it's not to know that anyone even knows of this happening before. So it's just so crazy to me that people got so worked up about it. And to me, I feel like a lot of that is from people. I could be wrong because I haven't looked at everything that's out there, but it felt like a lot of the people who were getting upset about it are people who grew up with the prequels. And I remember when I saw that in the theater when it happened, being like, "Oh, huh? Oh, he just was born through the Force." I was just kind of like, "What?"
Yeah.
And slowly over time, I just grew to accept it. But at the moment, I don't recall being like, "Oh, that's so cool." But like, if you grew up at a time when these movies were already out, and this is the only thing you knew, then maybe it's more precious to you in that sense. But to
Maybe.
me, it was just like, it was not. It was never precious to me in that idea
No.
of it. And then, in fact, when I first saw it, I was kind of like turned my head to it, like, "I don't know about that. That seems what."
It seems
But
a little
whatever.
too
Yeah,
on the
I was like,
nose
whatever, George.
religion, kind of
Yeah.
okay.
So
Yeah.
for me, it was like not a big deal. So yeah, it's just weird to see all the vitriol and everything else that's come out of this one episode, and them trying to do a little something different in the story that just to me seems kind of interesting, and want to hear more, because there's obviously more to the story. Even when she says that within the conversation the two of the witches are having, she says that the Jedi find out how you did this, you know, you'll be in trouble or whatever she says. So there's more there.
Yeah.
So the fact that people get so upset without hearing the full story is indicative of what's wrong with society today as it is that everyone goes off half-cocked and
Yeah.
without knowing all the full information. So yeah, it's just so weird. And I just felt like, if you don't like the show and you knew that 2 episodes in, why did you watch the third episode? Just to see what it was
I'm
about?
with you.
And okay, now you don't know. Now you know for sure you don't like this show and it's trash. Please don't watch the rest of this show. Like, why would you do that? Unless you just want to hate watch,
Oh
which
yeah.
to me is the dumbest thing you could ever do, because then how does Disney and Lucasfilm distinguish a hate watch between a regular watch? They're just going to say,
Yeah.
"Oh, people are loving this," so
I
they're
know.
just going to keep doing more. So don't watch it if you don't like it. To me, there's
Uh,
if you are a Star Wars fan and this is not working for you, if you are really a Star Wars fan and you love this universe so much, leave live action alone. There's comics, there's animation, there's books, there's video games. There's so many other ways to enjoy Star Wars that don't have to watch live action right now if it's not doing it for you. You can get your enjoyment of Star Wars in so many different ways. So I would implore you to do that and not live with all this hate and be part of the dark side. Like just go and do something that's going to give you peace and not bring you anger and
Right.
hate.
Dude, I have nothing to add. Like everything you have said is right on the money. Like I'm with you, man. Like the stuff I saw today, I was really going, do I need to abandon ship from this? Like be, I mean, one, am I crazy? I mean, first as I started seeing
Yeah.
reactions today, I was getting to the point I'm like, wait, I was not seeing positive reaction almost at all. And hey, I mean, I know how social media works and algorithms and I'm
Yeah.
like, there's got to be stuff out there, but man, I am not seeing it. And then I even went to YouTube, and we follow a lot of the same people on YouTube, and
Hmm.
there's actually a lot of that I haven't seen the reactions yet. But like at least like finally, I went to YouTube. I watched one video, a channel I really enjoy, Star Wars Explained, and I watched his review today, and I was like, okay, I'm not nuts. Like someone else actually enjoyed this episode because I was starting to think that I was like on something last night that I didn't know I was on, and apparently I enjoyed it while everyone hated it. And I mean, again, and I wouldn't say the episode ended and I was like, man, that was great. Like
Right.
it was more like that was fine. Like
Yeah.
there was definitely things like I said I bumped on. There are things like you mentioned that like I remember in the middle of the episode going, okay, well, it's obvious this is the full episode, and this is interesting, and I am curious to know all this information, but I'm automatically already bummed that I'm not going to see any present day stuff.
Right.
And yeah, I was hoping at least for a tease at the end, but there was nothing like that. And then I'm like, oh man, we gotta wait till next week. And then it goes
Mm.
into one of my complaints still, which has been a complaint we've been all of us in Star Wars fandom have been chanting about for a long time, which is just runtime of these episodes. This one I think was a little longer than episode 2. I think this one was like 41 minutes or something. But
Mm.
but still, each episode, even though I'm enjoying the show, has had me feeling like wanting more. And especially when you are only getting these weekly, it's like there's just not enough to chew on. I feel like to, you know, make me happy for a week while I wait for the
Yeah.
next one. There just needs to be more here. And that's not to say you couldn't make amazing TV with 30-minute episodes. Obviously, it's been done forever, but this
Hmm.
kind of show just feels like it needs a little more there. So that's one bummer. But overall, I enjoyed it, and I was really starting to question my sanity as I scoured the internet today and had almost all the same thoughts you did in terms of like, are is this really just a super loud vocal minority? And
Mm.
and I do start to kind of think that it is, but
Hmm.
again, like there was stuff about this, like as a as whether or not it's Star Wars or not, that I just again really didn't even bump on as I watched the episode. And then there's been things that I'm aware of. I've talked to you about this, so there's stuff I think that's revealed in I think it's in Rebels that even I
Right.
remember talking to you about it and being like, I don't know how I feel about that in terms of the
Yeah.
Force and that's stuff that hasn't even really been kind of covered in live action yet. And I really do question if it ever is how people will react to that. Because to me, that was kind of the stuff that I was like, yeah, this is weird.
Mm.
And that I think is way crazier than whatever we saw in this episode. I mean, by a landslide. And that stuff is canon. Whether you like it or not. I mean, that is, you can make, I guess, your own canon. You live your own Star Wars life, and that's fine. I mean, I really think there's nothing wrong with that. If you were an original trilogy guy and that's all you want from your Star Wars, more power to you. Like, don't ever read or consume anything else and enjoy the original trilogy. They're great. I would understand that.
Yep.
I right now I think I tried rewatching Rise of Skywalker once and I just couldn't. And I have not revisited it. And part of me doesn't want to. Part of me just
Mm.
I don't even think about it. Like, and that works for me, you know? I'm not gonna watch it over and over and just scream and yell about it every time,
Yeah.
louder and louder. Yeah, I don't know. Everything you said again, it's exactly how I feel about how the stuff I've seen today from the Star Wars fandom, and it's kind of bumming me out. Um,
Yeah.
but at least I'm enjoying the show. There's that.
Yeah, I agree. And for me, I would say me enjoying this show is a little bit frustrating as well, just because since I do enjoy it, and kind of coming back around to what we were just talking about as far as the runtime, I do wish there was more of it, because it sometimes feels like, I think Michelle mentioned this, is that right when you feel like you're getting into it is when it ends.
Yeah,
And it's like, okay, there could have been a little bit more there. And I wish that they would do that. Well, there was a show I just watched. I binge watched it actually. I haven't binge watched a show in a while, but it's on Apple TV Plus called Sugar with
yeah.
Colin Farrell.
I haven't seen it, but I know what
And
you're talking about.
so those episodes are about 35, maybe 40 minutes long,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't feel short. They feel like a complete episode. And
Right.
obviously, it ends in a way that you're looking forward to the next episode. And it was a weekly drop. I caught it when it was all done, so I was able to just watch episode after episode. But it's done in a way where you just don't feel like it just got cut short. And that's where a lot of times these shows, specifically the Star Wars shows, feel like that. And I know we have one more series coming out, that's the Skeleton Crew, from pre Bob Iger coming in and saying that we need to slow down on some of these things on Disney Plus and take more time and develop more quality and stuff like that. So I'm going to be very curious in terms of what gets announced next for Disney Plus that's wholly original and not like Ahsoka season 2, or if they do a second season of the Acolyte, or anything like that, something completely new. Because I feel like if you are going to a mandate where, I think it was for, at least for Marvel, it was 3 movies a year. I think they said up to 5 things or something, like 3 movies and 2 TV series in a year.
Right.
And I think that even if Lucasfilm did something to where it was like 2 TV series for Star Wars in a year, they could easily, with this series being budgeted at 170 million. I don't see why they couldn't take more time to give us a longer episode count, and really kind of give us something on the level of Game of Thrones, that is appointment watching. Everybody's there week to week, and you're riveted to your seat. Because when I think about it, I can understand why, to a certain degree, there might be an issue with quality when it comes to some of the Marvel stuff, because they were cranking out so many different things within the theater and on streaming, that you could see how it could easily put a strain on things, especially when it's one studio and 1 or 2 people kind of going around to all these different things that has to kind of shepherd them. Whereas with Lucasfilm, let me know, because I can't think of anything outside of Star Wars that they focus on, that they have to focus on.
Right.
Indiana Jones is done now, so like, what else do they put out besides Star
Star
Wars?
Wars.
Yeah,
It's the
so
Star
why
Wars
can't you take your
studio.
time with this and
Right.
put out Game of Thrones level quality every week for whenever comes on? Because you have all this money and you have nothing else to spend it on. You're not developing any new IP. It's just Star Wars, like you said. It's the Star Wars studio. So
Yeah.
why wouldn't you make this as best as possible? Do something similar to what Marvel does, where they have those, um I forget what they call them, like, but like the retreats that they do, and they
Oh
sit
yeah.
there and have everybody in a room, and they did that for the High Republic books,
Right.
when they had all these different authors that were going to be doing this series, and plotted it all out, and laid it all out and did everything. I don't know why they couldn't do that for the movies and the series, the TV series that they have, other than maybe just that the leadership there is just not seeing it in that way, and they're just seeing that maybe the end results are okay by the means of what they're doing, um, other than I would say really Solo and maybe Boba Fett. Everything else has been doing pretty well for them, so they probably don't feel like they have a lot of misses to where they need to do something different. But I would say that clearly there's some disconnect there. And even though I don't agree with a lot of that vocal minority about things, it's clear that there hasn't been so much unity within the Star Wars universe of fans since maybe that first season of The Mandalorian.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like that should be too hard to duplicate. It shouldn't be this hard to duplicate, I should say. Uh, I think that you have the perfect vehicle within a series like this to give it more room to breathe and get into some of these stories that you're touching on and get deeper into it, like with the idea of the force and being this thread to these witches, and even to explore more of the Jedi and being able to see what it means to them, and to be able to go to these planets and go with these kids. Because there was something that Carrie Ann Moss's character said at one point, um, that I had turned my head to the side when she said it, because she was like, the Republic uh, says we have to do this, and then the witch was like, well, we're not part of the Republic, and she was like, she said something in return. I was like, well, that's kind of like, huh, okay. And then she kind of follows it up by saying that something to the effect of the Jedi have the right to uh, test for force sensitive children or something like that. And the witch, I think at that point sort of backed down to it, and I was like, that's interesting. Like, I would like to hear more about why the Jedi have a right to be able to test force sensitive children. That doesn't seem like that should be their right to do that. And it's taken as sort of matter of factly by the witch that she's like, okay, I guess I have to let you test them. But it's just interesting, like thoughts like that to make you say, well, let's explore that a little bit more. But they probably won't. It's probably like, just something they said. And it's a
Mhm.
shame that we don't get more into those kind of ideas and concepts and thoughts about the Jedi, and kind of exploring it a little bit more. And even just within the general fact that this is towards the tail end of the High Republic and getting into the New Republic, I guess, or the Republic that everybody knows of, you would think that they would at least explore more of that as well, in the sense of, we're just completely and solely focused on this mystery without seeing some of the world of what the Jedi are like in this new, or in this High Republic era, which I know what they're like because I've read the books and stuff. But as a general audience member, you're only so focused on these few characters that you're not even seeing some of what this world represents as it is for the High Republic era. So I would like to see them explore more of that type of stuff within the series. I don't know that they will. And like I said, to me, I do like the series, but that would make me go from liking the series to loving the series if they got into some more of these nuances, and go and explore a little bit more depth, and get a little bit more beyond just sort of the surface level of what we're getting in the series.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, going back to runtime, I mean, you could easily do hour-long episodes where, some of this stuff is explored with good dialogue as a
Mm-hmm.
way to set up those kind of scenes. Because sure, I mean, we're talking spoilers at this point. Yeah, that scene with the Jedi showing up, there was definitely, like you just kind of alluded to or talked about, the dialogue between the witches and the Jedi, stuff about it that had me asking a lot of questions of like, yeah, you're obviously touching on the fact that Jedi take kids and, train them to be Jedi at a very young age. And, if there's anything about the Jedi that seems a little wonky, that's, probably one of them. But you're only
Mm-hmm.
barely touching that here. And it almost seems kind of confusing when you see how the Jedi are, revered, and there's obviously interesting stuff going on here, but then you're doing nothing with it, or at least right now you're not. Maybe you're
Right.
going to explore it more throughout the season. I don't know. Yeah, like you said, like she talks about how, well, we're not part of the Republic, but it is interesting how quick she is to just go, okay, fine. Like, yeah, I mean, everything you just said, I agree. There's a lot there that could have been, expounded upon with
Mm.
good writing and a longer episode, but they chose not to do it. And I would agree. I think for the most part, that stuff's not going to get touched on.
Yeah.
And I think it's great that the other material exists in the books. And I'm not saying we need to cover everything they cover in those books because, hey, if you're interested, go read the books. But at the same time, I think there's kind of important stuff to what's going on here that should be included for the audience who's
Hmm.
clearly not going to read all that other stuff. Obviously, it's got to be a small fraction of the Acolyte audience that has read all of the High Republic material. I mean, that's just the way it
Super small.
is.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a bummer to not see some of that stuff fleshed out a little better in these episodes.
Yeah. Yeah. And the one thing that I feel like I'm happy about with this show is that the critics and everyone else only got to see the first 4 episodes, because after next week they'll be in the same boat as the rest of us, to
Yeah,
where it's like, okay, we'll have to see how these last 4 go, and see where it goes from there. And going back to what you said about maybe this loud people on social media is a vocal minority, which I tend to think is true, because most people don't have time to be on Twitter or
right,
X or whatever, like posting hate videos and doing all the things that most people do on these sites.
right.
So and it's also kind of it bears out a little bit when you look at the Rotten Tomatoes, where the critics, I think, gave the first 4 episodes of the series something in the 90s or maybe
I
80s.
think it was a
And
91 the last time I looked.
okay.
I could have dropped,
And
but
the audience score is like in the 20s or something. But if you are looking at that and thinking that people in general hate the show, just know that with Rotten Tomatoes, while they do some sort of level of screening for movies when there's an audience score, they don't do that for any of the TV shows or streaming shows. So people were review bombing this series the day before it even came out to
right,
kind of lower the score just on that perception alone. So it's not really indicative of how an actual general audience would feel about the show. And I think that maybe we can get a little bit of a gauge on how a general audience feels about the show once we see how the numbers are when it's all said and done for the series.
yeah, I know when I checked Rotten Tomatoes the other day, it was like 91. Now it's down to 85 for a
Mm,
critic score. Again, not by much. It's still a pretty
it's
solid
still
score
good.
for a TV show.
Yeah.
I was thinking of like some of the small stuff I did bump on in the episode, and I was curious to know if there were other things or the same things that I kind of bumped on.
Hmm.
I will say like the chant I think that the
I
witches
knew
are
you were gonna say
doing.
that. I knew you were
It's
gonna say that.
it
When you
was a
said
little
it earlier
like
that there was something you bumped on against, I was like, it has to be the singing, the
it
chanting that they're
was.
doing.
That was a moment I was like,
Yeah.
not a fan of this. You could have done
Yeah.
something like in sorry, kind of a fake whatever language that would have just sounded. It would have
Right.
just been more effective for the mood that you're trying to convey.
Yeah.
There was,
I agree.
yeah, and it was interesting how even the score choir was like
Mm-hmm.
it was included in the score music as well at that moment, and I'm
Yeah.
just like, this is no.
Yeah.
I was
And
not
the
a
one
fan of
lady,
that.
I don't know who it was, but there's one lady, you don't see who it is, but she's like or
Oh
something.
yeah, yeah,
It's like she's like that one lady in church that's really feeling it. It's
all
just
right.
like going off. So I was just like, man, okay, this is a choice. I'm not really on board with it, but okay. It was different, but yeah, I didn't really vibe with it either. I bumped up against it. Of course, it didn't make me hate it or anything like that,
No,
but
again,
you
that's a
know,
nitpicky thing for me.
yeah,
Sure, I would change that moment. I would change that
yeah,
them
for sure.
just kind of singing and or chanting in English. This really
Yeah,
silly, like I don't even remember what they were saying, but it was not great.
no, I don't either.
But it's
One to the many or power one. I don't know something
something I
one.
don't know,
Yeah,
but whatever. But even so, it didn't really affect my overall enjoyment of the episode. It was just
right.
one thing.
No,
Something else I was going to ask you about, completely unrelated. I was curious what you thought of the use of two different young actresses to play the twins.
I saw a lot of people talking about that as well,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that when I was watching the episode, I was looking at the two of them, and there was times I was like, are they twins? I can't quite tell. And then there was other times I was like, I don't know which one I'm looking at right now. Like I don't
Hmm.
know who's who. So honestly, there was times when it completely fooled me and I thought they were actually the same actress. And there was other times when I was like, they something looks different about the two of them. And so it was like I went back and forth between it. But ultimately it didn't really bother me because I didn't fully truly know that they were two different actresses until I started looking online and seeing people talking about the fact that they had two different actresses. But uh, it fooled me enough to where I didn't really think about it, so it didn't bother me. But I could see how if someone noticed it right away, where it would be kind of like that seems like an odd choice because clearly Amanda Steinberg, she's playing the two characters and
Mm-hmm.
she's not like a twin. She doesn't have a twin. So
Right.
it seems kind of like an odd choice to say, okay, as a younger actress, we'll just get two different girls as opposed to one girl playing opposite herself, unless they just didn't feel like they could find someone that kind of matches Amanda's look and can pull off that sort of one person playing two roles thing at such a young age. That is the only thing I could think of. But
That and
other than
like
that, it just seemed like an odd choice.
maybe it was also to do with the way certain scenes were playing out because there's so many scenes with the two of them
Mm,
there. There's
hmm.
like the horseplay between the two of them, stuff like that. I mean, clearly
Yeah,
we
could
know
be
that that can be done with effects and everything, but
right.
maybe that was another reason they decided to go with two actresses. Yeah, I know. I mean, I felt like as soon as like because I think we see Osha there at first, that first shot of her with the weird butterfly looking thing, and
Hmm.
then May walks up, and I think there was a couple back and forths of the camera for me to go, wait a second, I think these are two different people, like two different
Mm,
actresses. But I was unsure for a little while, and then I could use. Then there was a moment where I was like, okay, no, these are definitely two different girls. I mean, after the episode was over, I still kind of somewhat questioned myself, so I looked it up, and I was like, okay, I'm not
mm,
crazy. It was two different girls.
okay.
But I mean, yeah, I didn't have a problem with it. But I guess I did
Mm,
just like you just said. I kind of thought about it since we only have one actress playing the older parts, and then they decided to use two different actresses here. And but it's not something that really bugs me. It's just more something I
no.
kind of thought about, and I was just guess I'm still kind of thinking like, does it kind of
Yeah.
bug me? But maybe a little, but not that
I
much.
would just be more curious as to the reason why they did it more
Right.
so than it having any effect on me in watching the show. Just because it seems so odd to do it that way.
Yeah. Um, Speaking of the girls in particular, I think in this episode, I mean, nothing, against the girls acting, but I mean, and I guess I would agree with Michelle. I know this, I think, take she had on the first couple episodes was the dialogue in general. There's
Mm,
times I think it's better than others.
hmm.
Sure, I would say overall, the dialogue, the writing is not the best I've heard. And we're even just talking Star Wars, where the dialogue at times has been atrocious.
You're right.
But here there's definitely scenes where I'm like, it could be better. There's like I
Yeah.
was thinking back to I rewatched episode 1, and there's like one back and forth between Saul and what's her name with the green skin, and like I almost wanted to record
Venestra.
that bit of dialogue, yeah, and just be like, okay, yeah, no, this is not the way people speak even in this world. Like, I don't know,
Yeah.
it was something about it that just wasn't natural. And same thing here. There's a lot of the dialogue I think of the twins that I was like, this is weak. I get that they're kids, but still, uh, and some others, but overall, it's still not to a level that's really just killing me. I think maybe that's just because I'm enjoying the show overall and I'm letting some of the
Right.
dialogue go. But I was
Yeah.
curious if it's something you noticed or thought about.
I noticed it. I feel the same way. And to me, it's one of those things where this is where I kind of side with some of the that vocal minority in a sense, where I say, and kind of going back to the point I made earlier, what is Lucasfilm doing outside of Star Wars? Not
Right.
much. So how are you not taking your time enough with this and looking at it and saying, you know what, that scene didn't quite work. Let's do that one again and get a better take of that. Or, you know, some of this dialogue doesn't quite come off right. Let's rework this a little bit. Because it's not like they're under a timetable that I'm
Mm-hmm.
aware of to where they say where Marvel they pinpoint a time on the calendar, throw a dart at it, and say, oh, okay, this movie needs to be ready by this date because this is our release date. Now, sure, they do push stuff back because of things here and there, but typically they tell you when it's coming out. We didn't know when the Acolyte was coming out. In fact, it seems like it should have come out like last year or if not earlier than that
Yeah.
because it seemed like it had been announced forever ago. But the time that it feels like you could take within these things to tighten certain things up, they're not doing. And that's why I could see why some people would be more frustrated with the shows because it feels like with all the money and all the time and care in the world that you could have to devote to these things,
Mm-hmm.
it should be so top notch. And especially when you have shows to compare it to like Game of Thrones that's out there or House of the Dragon or one of the shows I love from this year is Shogun. It's like, yeah, you could do so much better, and that's why it's like I can understand some of that frustration. Whereas even though I do feel that and I do know that they could be so much better, and again comparing it to one of their own things that they've done, which is Andor, you know the level in which it could be. So why not go for that every time out the gate
Right.
when you can't just rely on just having the Star Wars name to carry you through? And so I feel like while I do like the show and am enjoying what I'm seeing, I just know my level for it could be so much higher if they did certain things to take care. And but you know, I still at the end of the day am enjoying it more than I enjoyed Book of Boba Fett,
Oh
more
yeah.
than I did Obi-Wan. So I
Yep.
still feel like it's still better than what we've gotten in some of these other things. I just know it still could even get to a higher plateau if it was really doing and firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, absolutely. But as the show stands, I agree. I'm enjoying it so far. But we're 3 episodes into what an 8 episode run,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously it could still go either way at this point. I
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
the show shows promise. That's why I'm enjoying it, and I think it's going to
Mm-hmm.
go in a good direction. But absolutely, we could be talking after episode 5 or 6, and you and I could be going, "Wow, man, this just went. Oh, no, this is bad." I don't think that's going to be
Yep.
the case, but we'll see. But so far,
Yeah.
it's different Star Wars. It's interesting. It's Force users in Star Wars, and I'm saying that I love Andor. I love the part of Star Wars that you don't see a lightsaber anywhere. That's
Mm-hmm.
fine, but it is nice to watch something with some lightsabers with the
Mm-hmm.
Force. Like it's interesting to explore some of the stuff I know that's been explored in the animated stuff, for instance, being shown in live action. It may be upsetting some people. Oh well, but
Mm.
I'm enjoying it. I like to see different parts of this galaxy, not just Jedi using the Force. I think it makes things interesting. So
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that it's a big universe, and getting to
Yeah,
explore different areas of it and different time periods of it is what's needed for it to continue to grow and thrive and bring in other people as well.
yeah.
And I'm here for all of that. And, there's something that I saw a couple weeks ago about something that was going to happen in an episode, and to most people it will mean absolutely nothing unless you've probably read the books. And for me, it's like I am so anticipating and looking forward to it that I just can't wait, because I feel like some of those little things that you get when you're reading the books that happens in live action or gets talked about in live action is such a nice little payoff to the
Yeah.
stories that you've been kind of being invested in. So I'm looking forward to some more of what's going on in the series, and looking forward to one of the things that I kind of saw or heard about actually showing up in the series as well. So for me, I'm definitely into it, and I will always watch Star Wars related products and shows and things. And I don't play games much these days, but I am very tempted to try and get Outlaws, Star Wars Outlaws, when it
Yeah.
comes out,
Yep.
just because I love Star Wars universe.
Agreed. Um, yeah, I know we're running out of time. Anything else you wanted to touch on before we go?
No, it's just that you know, again, just to kind of reiterate, I'm very curious, since we're just talking about Star Wars in general. I'm very curious as to the future of Star Wars and what that means for the streaming world, because we kind of know, at least already for the movies, what we got coming up with the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, and the Ray movie.
Mm.
Don't know anything beyond that, but honestly, I don't know if I would believe anything beyond that because
I mean, we've
so
been
many things
told
get
things beyond
announced.
that, but
Yeah. Yeah, so many things get announced and then canceled, or whatever,
right.
that it's hard to just kind of hold on to that. But at least with the streaming, that feels like that's more legit in terms of everything they've said that they're doing has been done or is still on the docket to come out. So for me, I'm kind of curious as to see what's next in that universe outside of a Ahsoka season 2, which hasn't been officially greenlit, but
I
all
didn't think
intents and
so.
purposes, it seems like it's leading to that being a reality. And so I would think that would be the next thing that they would have, um, outside of Skeleton Crew, that comes out, I think, later this year. So yeah, I'm curious to see what else we got, and what that looks like under Iger and his more mandate of the quality versus the quantity of stuff to come out.
Yeah, what do we have? We have a D23 in August, right? Um,
I couldn't remember if we
I
had one this year,
think we
because I know
do.
Celebration is
Celebration, I
that
think, is in
this year
next
or next year?
spring. I think it's in
Okay,
2025.
okay, that's
Yeah, in
is
Japan.
it in Japan?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so
So
maybe D23, maybe
since
even
yeah, since
Comic
that
Con. Who
it's
knows?
yeah, since Celebration is like a year off, or yeah, maybe San Diego Comic Con. We might get some announcements, but since D23 is in August, I guess I would have put my money on that if we heard
Hmm,
any more announcements, it'd be then, unless it's stuff they feel like can wait till the spring, next
yeah,
spring.
could be, could be.
Um, yeah, I don't know, but I'm with you. I'm curious to see where we go from here. Obviously, I think we know that Disney is going to care mostly about the streaming numbers, but they have to be aware of the constant discourse. But they also, I think, roll their eyes mostly at the
Yeah,
ridiculousness of certain parts of the fandom. So
yeah.
yeah, we'll see where they go from here. Yeah, with that, I think we're going to wrap things up. As always, we'd love to hear back from you. What did you think of episode 3? What did you think of our thoughts? Leave us a comment on YouTube if you're watching us there, youtube.com/Flicker Effect. You can reach out to us on Instagram and Twitter, or X, at Flicker_Effect as well. And if email's your thing, feedback@flickereffect.com works for us. With that, I'm Dave Lott.
Bobby Jackson.
Thanks for listening and watching, everybody. Bye bye.
See ya.
See ya.